The year 2000, City Hall. Here are your divorce papers. Victoria Vance stared blankly at the divorce certificate the clerk handed her, a slight pang in her heart. 20 years. 20 years ago, when she got married, the certificate was a single sheet of paper, like an award. Now, the divorce came in a little green booklet. A hand with long, distinct fingers reached past Victoria's line of sight and snatched the certificate first, an air of impatience about it. It was her husband, Sincere Shaw's hand, no, her ex-husband's now. Victoria paused for a moment, then took her copy of the certificate and followed Sincere's quick footsteps out of City Hall. The sunlight outside was brilliant. It stung Victoria's eyes, blurring her vision. She called out to Sincere's retreating back, "How about a farewell dinner? Let's go to the Gilded Duck." The tall figure stopped for a beat, but didn't even turn his head. His voice was laced with annoyance. No. With that, he walked briskly toward a luxury car parked by the roadside. A woman was already waiting by the car. As soon as Sincere reached her, he took her hand tightly, and they got into the car together. He'd been having an affair with that woman for 10 years. Today, Sincere Shaw finally got his wish and divorced her. Victoria had no choice but to go to the Gilded Duck alone. The waiter smiled. "How many in your party?" "Just one." The waiter looked at her with some surprise. It was rare for someone to dine alone at a grand restaurant like this. After being seated, Victoria ordered the signature roast duck. The dish arrived quickly. The duck was a tempting golden brown, the skin crispy and fragrant. Dipped in sugar, it was even more flavorful, tasting exactly as it had 20 years ago. The only thing different was that the person who had sat beside her was gone. At that thought, the sweetness on her tongue seemed to slowly turn to bitterness. They had been so in love when they were young, yet it couldn't stand up to the old cliché. A man gets rich and abandons his first wife. She had naively believed they would grow old together, but she had lost to the sweet nothings of another woman. As time passed, the steaming roast duck grew cold. Mixed with the sugar, it became cloying and greasy, just like their marriage. But Victoria swallowed it bite by bite. Just then, the waiter returned. "Ma'am, would you mind leaving a review for our dish?" Victoria paused, then took the pen and paper and slowly began to write. "Today is actually my birthday." The tip of the pen paused, then continued. "I remember the first time I came here. It was my first birthday after my husband and I got married. We were so poor back then, we couldn't afford it at all. He knew I wanted to try it, so he saved up for months to bring me here. The roast duck was absolutely delicious. At that moment, I felt like the happiest person in the world. Today, I turned 40, but I also got divorced. The roast duck still tastes the same. It's delicious." After leaving the review, Victoria left quietly. A little while later, the waiter came back. She stared at the note for a long time, her eyes welling up, and then posted the review right in the center of the feedback board. Victoria got home at 11 o'clock at night. The house was cold and empty. She sat on the sofa and turned on the television. A popular talk show was on. It was the golden age of television stars. The host smiled and asked a beautiful starlet, "If you could go back in time, what would you do?" Victoria's eyes flickered. She answered silently in her heart, "If I could go back in time, I would choose to leave him sooner." Her eyes grew heavy with sleep. The hands of the clock crept toward midnight. As the hour, minute, and second hands aligned into a single straight line, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Victoria slept more soundly than she had in years. When she opened her eyes again, she was completely bewildered. Before her was a small, cramped room, and she was lying on a simple, rustic bed. Wasn't this the house she lived in right after she got married? She scrambled to her feet and stood in the middle of the room, her eyes scanning her surroundings. Her gaze froze on the wall calendar. There, in large, bold print on the bright red calendar, the date stabbed into her eyes. September 16, 1980. This was the first year of the new era of enterprise, and the first year of her marriage to Sincere. It all felt like a dream. She instinctively pinched herself. A sharp pain followed. It hurt. It wasn't a dream. It seemed she had really gone back in time. Just then, the door creaked open. Victoria looked up, stunned, to see a young Sincere Shaw standing in the doorway. He was dressed in simple clothes, his tall frame nearly blocking out the entire doorway. Their eyes met. Sincere's gaze was filled with disbelief. "What's going on?" "You're Victoria? How did you get so young?" Victoria stared at him in shock, only one thought echoing in her mind. She had been reborn. What she hadn't expected was that her ex-husband had come back with her. They stared at each other, falling into a long, heavy silence. Just then, an elderly woman walked in, smiling warmly at them. "What are you two still doing here? It's Vicky's birthday today. Weren't you going to get some of that roast duck from the Gilded Duck?" It was Sincere's mother, Victoria's mother-in-law, Martha Shaw. In her previous life, she had passed away from illness in 1989. Seeing her, they both froze. Victoria's heart filled with a mixture of joy and sorrow. In truth, the first 10 years of her marriage had been happy. Besides the fact that Sincere had loved her back then, the most important thing was that her mother-in-law had treated her so well. Victoria's parents had died young, and after she married, it was Martha who had given her the maternal love she had longed for. Victoria's voice choked as she managed a single word, "Mom." Martha, however, didn't notice the strange atmosphere. She just urged them on. "Hurry up and go, you'll have to wait in a long line otherwise." Seeing Victoria standing there dumbly, the silent Sincere finally reacted. He stepped forward, grabbed Victoria's wrist, and pulled her toward the door. "Let's go." It wasn't until they had left the courtyard and were surrounded by the calls of street vendors in the old cobblestone alleys that Victoria snapped back to reality. Cotton candy, caramel apples amidst the noise, Sincere stopped and looked at her. "Which way is the Gilded Duck?" Victoria pulled her hand free. "I don't want to go." She'd already had it in her last life. She no longer had any lingering attachment to it. "Fine," Sincere said with a glance, not seeming to care. "Then let's talk." They went to Lakeside Park, which looked almost exactly the same as it would 20 years later, except the public benches were now made of wood. They sat at opposite ends of a bench, a good 2 feet of space between them. After coming to terms with the reality that they had both been reborn, Sincere's brow furrowed. What now? He was talking about their marriage. In their past life, they had reached the point of divorce. Even if they were reborn, they couldn't just pretend nothing had happened and stay together. Victoria was silent for a moment, her face calm as she replied, "Let's get divorced again." "Easier said than done," Sincere scoffed. It was 1980. To the outside world, they were a loving, newlywed couple. A sudden divorce would be incomprehensible to everyone, including their families. Besides, Sincere's mother had a heart condition and couldn't handle the shock. Victoria's heart sank. "Then maybe we don't get divorced?" she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "No," Sincere cut her off before she could finish. Victoria looked at him. Their eyes met, and Sincere's flickered away, a hint of guilt in his expression. His reaction made everything clear to Victoria in an instant. He was still thinking about his true love, Melody Holmes. In their past life, Sincere had met Melody 10 years into their marriage. From the age of 30 to 40, Victoria had been entangled with them for a decade, leaving her mentally and physically exhausted. She didn't want to fight about it. After a moment of thought, she said, "Then we won't divorce for now. We'll tell everyone later that we've grown apart. Once our families have accepted it, we'll file the papers." It seemed like the best solution. Sincere pressed his lips together and reluctantly agreed. After their discussion, Sincere left. Victoria sat alone, staring at the lake for a long time, a sense of confusion washing over her. Suddenly thrown back to her youth, she had no idea what to do or where to go. In her past life, she and Sincere had both been forced to go into business after a wave of factory closures. They had struggled for 10 years, and just when their hard work finally paid off, Sincere had broken his vows, dealing her a devastating blow. This time, Victoria didn't want to live like that again. Suddenly, a paper airplane drifted down on the wind and landed right in front of her. Victoria picked it up and handed it to a little girl who came running over. The girl looked up at her and said, "Thank you, miss." Victoria's heart softened. "You're welcome." If our child had been born, she thought, they would have been just as cute. The girl's mother came over, thanked her, and led her daughter away. The girl's innocent voice drifted back. "Mommy, why can't I fly like a paper airplane?" "Because we don't have wings, sweetie." Their voices faded as they walked away, but Victoria remained frozen in place. A long time ago, she had asked her father the same question. Mr. Vance had told her, "Only pilots can fly with airplanes. And when you're a pilot, you can fire cannons and fight enemies. Pew pew pew, it's so cool." She still remembered her reply. Then I want to be a pilot too. I'll fly planes and go into battle. Victoria returned home late. As she entered, she saw Sincere flipping through a notebook. When he saw her, he suddenly looked up, his expression complicated. Confused, Victoria glanced at the notebook and her eyes froze. It was her diary from when she was young. She had a habit of writing down her daily activities, and on the open page was yesterday's entry. September 15, 1980. The temperature dropped suddenly today. I was grumbling about buying a new blanket this morning, but forgot about it after work. I thought I was going to freeze tonight, but Sincere came home carrying a new one on his back. He also brought a stick of caramel apples. I'm so happy. He not only remembered what I said, but he also remembered what I love to eat. A wave of bittersweet emotion washed over Victoria. She had almost forgotten that Sincere had once loved her like this. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Sincere's lips move, as if he wanted to say something. Victoria snapped the book shut. That's all in the past, she said, her tone completely flat. The air fell silent for a long time. Sincere gave her a complex look and said slowly, "Yes, it's all in the past." With that, he walked past her and out the door. As he brushed past, Victoria's heart felt hollow for a moment. She couldn't place the feeling, but a single thought came to her. The first lesson in life is to accept that anyone can leave. Only by returning to the past did she truly understand. The following days were a blur of activity. Victoria worked her shift at the garment factory while secretly gathering information about the Pilot Academy entrance exams. Sincere, meanwhile, was busy with his own mysterious ventures, leaving early and returning late every day. One day at the factory, as Victoria was skillfully working the sewing machine, a coworker leaned over. "Hey, Vicky, I heard your husband is quitting his job. They say he's answering the call of the new era of enterprise and heading south to do business. You should talk some sense into him. This is a stable job for life." Victoria's foot paused on the pedal. "I'll talk to him," she said faintly. In her past life, after the layoffs, she and Sincere had started from scratch, running a street stall, waking up before dawn and working late into the night. During the hardest times, they huddled in a tiny 10-square-meter rental in a booming coastal city, eating nothing but pickled vegetables and stale bread. Eventually, they made their fortune, moving into a 3-story villa and dining on abalone and sea cucumber. But by then, Sincere never had a proper meal with her again. Victoria knew that, with his past experience, Sincere would succeed again. But she didn't care. She had her own path to follow. After work, Victoria went to a bookstore and bought several books before heading home. At 8 p.m., Sincere came home. Victoria, who was sitting at the living room table reading, looked up. He looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with ambition. Victoria paused, then asked casually, "Are you quitting your job?" Sincere looked at her and replied flatly, "Yeah. I got in touch with Derek Lee." Derek Lee? He was a familiar supplier from their past life, but he was far away in the southern trade hubs. She had no idea how Sincere had managed to contact him. "I see," Victoria said, asking no more questions. Sincere glanced at the messy table, covered with newspapers and several English dictionaries. He didn't care what she was doing. He walked into the inner room with a look of indifference. Victoria was used to it. She turned back to her books, her eyes falling on an Air Force recruitment brochure on the desk. Air Force Pilot Recruitment Deadline, December 1, 1980. This was the information Victoria had found. She had signed up immediately. Previously, pilots were selected from the military or military academies. This was the first time they were recruiting from the public. The age limit was 17-20. She was already 20. This was her last chance. Victoria focused on her English exercises. Suddenly, she heard Sincere's frantic shout from the inner room. "Mom, what's wrong?" Something happened to Mom. Victoria's heart leaped into her throat, and she rushed out. The scene before her made her blood run cold. Martha was lying on the floor, her lips blue. Sincere was frantically searching his mother's pockets. "The medicine, where's Mom's medicine?" Victoria snapped out of her shock, pushed Sincere aside, and pulled a small vial from a chain around the elderly woman's neck. It was nitroglycerin. She placed a few pills under Martha's tongue, but her complexion didn't improve. Now they were both truly panicked. One of them scooped up the elderly woman and rushed outside, while the other went to borrow a neighbor's utility trike to get to the hospital. They moved with perfect, unspoken coordination. Soon, Sincere was pedaling the trike furiously, with Victoria holding the unconscious Martha, racing toward the hospital. Outside the emergency room, time stretched on, agonizingly slow. Sincere and Victoria stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the red light above the door. Finally, the door opened. They rushed forward almost in unison. "Doctor, how's my mom?" The doctor looked exhausted. "We stabilized her. You can go in a little while." With that, the doctor walked away. The two of them, left standing there, were overcome with relief. They looked at each other, their hands unconsciously clasping together tightly. Just then, a nurse came out. "Who are the relatives of Martha Shaw? It's time to pay the bill." Before Victoria could react, she saw Sincere's body go rigid. The next second, as if zapped by electricity, he quickly let go of Victoria's hand. Then, he strode toward the nurse. Victoria watched, and suddenly she recognized the woman too. It was Melody Holmes, a young Melody Holmes. Sincere's gaze on Melody was intense and profound. Victoria stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Even though she had prepared herself for their meeting in this life, seeing it happen so soon still caught her off guard. Her heart felt like it had been seared by a red-hot iron, a sharp, yet numb, pain. It was bound to happen sooner or later, she thought. It's just happened a little earlier this time. Whatever. She would leave as soon as Martha was a little better. Over there, Sincere had already started talking to her, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "Melody, I'm Sincere Shaw." Melody looked at him, surprised. "Do I know you?" Sincere froze for a second, then realized they hadn't met yet in this timeline. "No, I mean I'm Martha Shaw's family. How is my mother?" He recovered. "She's still unconscious and needs to be hospitalized for a few days of observation. The family needs to go pay the fees." After giving her instructions, Melody turned and left. Sincere's eyes remained fixed on her retreating back. He only looked away after she had disappeared. Victoria had already suppressed her emotions. Seeing him still lost in thought, she said flatly, "I'll go pay the bill. You go check on Mom." After the paperwork was done, Martha was moved to a regular ward. Victoria took a leave of absence from the factory to focus on caring for her. Sincere, on the other hand, was constantly out, busy with his affairs. But he still came every day, rushing in to see his mother for a moment before disappearing again. Victoria had thought he still had some filial piety left, until she went to the outpatient desk to pay a bill and saw Sincere giving a watch to Melody in the hallway. She stopped in her tracks. She heard Sincere's gentle voice echo in the empty corridor. "Mel, this watch suits you perfectly. Try it on." Melody was delighted. "Thank you, Brother Shaw. Are you free tomorrow? I'd like to treat you to dinner." "Of course, I have time," Sincere replied dotingly. Victoria stood in the corner, watching them flirt openly. She couldn't even muster the energy to be angry anymore, only a dull, residual ache. She had seen this scene far too many times in her past life. Soon, Sincere left. Melody, however, stared at his retreating back for a long time. Head Nurse Peterson, who was standing at the nurse's station, saw this and scowled. "Melody Holmes, watch your conduct," she said sharply. "You shouldn't be accepting gifts from him. He's a married man." Melody was unconcerned. "Head nurse, he doesn't love his wife at all. I don't care about his past, as long as I have a future with him." Doesn't love? Melody was right about that, but Sincere was certainly impatient, being so blatant before they were even divorced. Victoria didn't want to hear any more. She turned and went back to the ward. As she reached the door, she saw Sincere waiting there. Their eyes met. His expression flickered, as if he had something to say. Victoria spoke first. "Is something wrong?" Sincere finally spoke. "Business has been good lately, and I'm a bit overwhelmed. Could you come to the store and help out tomorrow?" He had opened a store, and Victoria hadn't even known. Sincere had never thought to tell her. But Victoria had her own things to do. "I'm busy too," she refused. "I can't help you." Sincere's brow furrowed. "What could you possibly be busy with? I'll pay you, I won't make you work for free. How about a 1% commission per sale?" His tone was full of displeasure, but it wasn't about the money. Victoria's ambitions lay elsewhere. She didn't want to repeat her past life. She wanted to pursue her own dream. "I just think that since we're getting divorced anyway, it's better if we don't get involved," she said flatly. Sincere's brow tightened. "In our last life, I gave you money when we divorced because you worked hard with me. In this life, you're not helping at all. Are you just planning to wait for the divorce and take half? I don't owe you anything, don't owe you anything. The words were like a knife, stabbing straight into Victoria's heart. She stared at him, her throat tight. You think you don't owe me anything? In their past life, they had no children. It was because during one of their business trips, they had been attacked by robbers. Victoria had shielded Sincere from a wooden club that was about to crash down on his head. The club had struck her in the stomach instead. She lost her 2-month-old baby, and with it, the ability to ever become a mother. At that time, Sincere had held her hand and sworn, "This is what I owe you. I will treat you well for the rest of my life." And now, what do I owe you? Sincere's piercing question echoed in her ears, shattering those memories to pieces. Victoria looked at him for a few seconds, then said slowly, "Yes, you don't owe me anything now." Her hand, hanging at her side, clenched into a fist. In this life, she would never give Sincere the chance to owe her anything again. Martha stayed in the hospital for a week before the doctor finally discharged her. The weight on Victoria's chest finally lifted. She went to handle the discharge papers while Sincere packed their things. When she returned, just as she reached the door to the ward, she heard them talking about her inside. Her feet froze. She heard Martha ask, "What's going on with you and Vicky? I haven't seen you two talk lately." Sincere replied evasively, "We're fine, Mom." "Fine? What's fine about it?" Martha snapped. "You used to come home from work and wrap your arms around Vicky, whispering secrets. What about now? You either don't talk, or when you do, you have a long face." Sincere was silent for a moment before he said slowly, "That was all in the past. People change." The moment he said that, Martha exploded. "Don't think I don't know what you've been up to. Don't make me go and tear that Holmes trollop to shreds." Sincere grew anxious and quickly defended her. "Mom, Melody is a good person. She's much better than Victoria." Victoria couldn't listen anymore. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. The voices inside immediately stopped. Only then did Victoria walk in, feigning ignorance as she smiled at Martha. "Mom, the papers are all done. Let's go home." Back home, a knot of frustration tightened in Victoria's chest. She threw herself into exercising and practicing English with even greater ferocity. Because pilots needed to undergo anti-vertigo training, Victoria would go to the park every morning after breakfast and commandeer the spinning merry-go-round. Round and round she spun. It was as if she was flinging out all the frustration bottled up inside her. One day, as Victoria got off the merry-go-round, she looked up and saw Sincere and Melody not far away. They were watching her, whispering about something. Victoria's gaze swept over their clasped hands. In the past, the sight would have tormented her, but now she felt nothing. Their eyes met for a second before Victoria turned and walked away. That evening, Sincere came home for dinner, a rare occurrence. After the meal, he asked her, "Instead of thinking about making money, why are you always fighting with kids for a seat on the merry-go-round?" It was an accusation Victoria felt no need to answer, so she remained silent. Faced with her cold indifference, Sincere grew agitated. He hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "It's like this. I'm planning to sell the house, just like in our last life. I'll use the money to buy a large shipment of goods, and when I make a profit, I'll buy a bigger house." Hearing this, Victoria frowned in disapproval. "You can't get rich overnight. I suggest you take it slow." She offered her advice in good faith, but Sincere wouldn't listen. He slapped the table coldly. "This is my house. If you don't agree, you can move out." His words left Victoria frozen. She suddenly remembered what Sincere had said when they sold the house in their past life. He had said, "This house isn't yours or mine. After we sell it, you can manage all the money. When we buy a bigger house later, we'll put it only in your name." Later, they did get a bigger house, and Sincere kept his promise and put her name on the deed. But the house after that, the one on the property deed, had only Melody's name on it. Looking at the cold, stern Sincere before her, Victoria let out a small laugh. What was she even fighting for? They were getting divorced anyway. It was his property. He could sell it if he wanted. Soon, Sincere had signed the contract to sell the house. Victoria moved with Martha to a temporary rental. To her surprise, the new apartment was right next to a pawn shop. Seeing the large, bold sign, Victoria remembered something. She turned and went into the inner room, retrieving a small box. Inside was a gold ring. It was the ring Sincere had given her when he proposed, a symbol of a love as pure as gold. She hadn't thrown it away after their divorce in the past life, because she knew that in that moment when he proposed, Sincere had been sincere. Even though sincerity could be fleeting, she had wanted to hold on to that memory. But now, she didn't want to keep it anymore. Since Sincere had said the house was his to sell, then this ring was hers to sell. With that thought, Victoria walked into the pawn shop. "Sir, I'd like to sell something." After they moved, Sincere came home even less. Seeing them interact less and less, Martha grew anxious. She cooked a meal and asked Victoria to take it to Sincere's store. But as soon as Victoria arrived at the door, she saw Melody linked arm in arm with Sincere, counting money like she owned the place. An employee joked with them, "Boss, when are you planning to marry Miss Holmes?" Sincere glanced at Melody, a smile playing on his lips. "Soon, I'm preparing for the divorce." Victoria watched the scene quietly. Her hand tightened on the lunchbox for a moment. She stood there for a while but didn't go in. She just asked an employee to take the lunchbox inside. Then, she left without a word. The next day, Victoria was sitting in the living room doing her exercises when she heard a frantic knocking at the door. "Is anyone home? Is this Sincere Shaw's house? He's in trouble. He's been taken to the station." Victoria was startled. She glanced at her sleeping mother-in-law in the other room, then quickly opened the door and pulled the man into the alley. The employee looked at her, surprised, realizing she was the woman who had brought lunch the day before. He couldn't believe she was Sincere's wife. His mind reeled, but he quickly remembered why he was there. The police said the store was selling counterfeit goods. The boss has been arrested for questioning. Victoria's heart sank. At the police station, she learned the whole story. It turned out Sincere had been tricked by his partner. Reborn with a lifetime of experience, he had become too arrogant, and someone had taken him for a ride. His entire, massive inventory was fake. Victoria went through the procedures to bail him out. A short while later, Sincere was escorted out by an officer. He looked surprised to see that Victoria was the one who had come for him. Then, he looked past her at the empty space behind her. There was no one there. Victoria took in his reaction. She was about to say, "Mom doesn't know about this." But in the next moment, Sincere walked over to the officer and asked, "Officer, did you manage to get a hold of the emergency room at the clinic? Why hasn't Melody come?" Victoria's eyelashes trembled. The words she was about to say died in her throat. The officer replied, "Melody answered the phone 2 hours ago, but she hung up immediately." The clinic was only a 10-minute walk from the station. If she had wanted to come, she would have been there long ago. It was obvious to anyone with eyes, but Sincere seemed to disbelieve it, muttering to himself, "She must be busy." Victoria heard everything but said nothing. After being bilayed out, Sincere was busy dealing with the fallout. Victoria, meanwhile, received a notice from the Air Force Recruitment Office instructing her to go to a designated hospital for a physical examination. She went to the hospital, her heart pounding with excitement. But as she walked into the lobby, she saw Sincere presenting a bouquet of flowers to Melody. So, they were back together again. Victoria's eyes met Sincere's from across the room. She quickly looked away and headed to the examination rooms. After her physical was done, she ran into Sincere again at the hospital entrance. He was standing there, his eyes fixed on her as she approached. He was clearly waiting for her. The air grew tense. Victoria spoke first. "Is there something you need?" Sincere was silent for a moment. He didn't even know why he had waited. Pressing his lips together, he suddenly brought up Melody. That day, Melody didn't hang up on purpose. Victoria gave him a strange look. She didn't know why Sincere was telling her this, but she didn't care, nor did she want to hear it. She gave a perfunctory reply. "I see. Is there anything else?" Sincere stared at her for a few more seconds. Then he looked away. "Fine," he said. "I just came to tell you not to get your hopes up. I'm definitely going to divorce you." The statement was almost funny, and Victoria did laugh, finding the whole situation absurd. "Good, I'm ready anytime." After saying this, Victoria's smile faded, and she waited for his response. She was even prepared to go get the divorce certificate right then and there. But Sincere started making excuses. "Let's wait until Mom is a little better." With that, he turned and left. Victoria stared at his retreating back, a dazed look in her eyes. She realized she truly didn't love him anymore. Before, the word divorce would tear her heart apart. Now, hearing it filled her with a sense of relief, of impending freedom. 2 days later, the sun was shining brightly. Victoria received a letter from the Air Force recruitment office via the mailman. You have passed the preliminary screening. Please report for the second round of examinations in 3 days. The details are as follows. Victoria suppressed her excitement and read the letter carefully. Suddenly, Sincere's questioning voice came from behind her. What are you reading? Victoria instinctively folded the letter and turned to face him, replying evasively, Nothing. Only after passing the second round would she be officially enlisted. It was in Victoria's nature not to tell anyone about something until it was a done deal. In the past, Sincere was the only one who knew her secrets, but now there was no need to tell him. Sincere glanced at the paper in her hand but didn't press the issue. He changed the subject. The Harvest Festival is next week. How about we spend it at home as a family? Victoria thought for a moment and agreed. Okay. She had already made up her mind. If she passed the second round, great. If not, she would go to another city and try to become a commercial pilot. Either way, after the festival, she would be leaving. 3 days later, Victoria arrived at the Air Force Recruitment Center as scheduled. After another round of rigorous physical exams, she began the written test. She felt she did reasonably well. Immediately after, the basic Air Force aptitude tests began. One of the tests, the anti-vertigo test, eliminated a large number of candidates. Many stumbled off the machine and threw up. As the sound of one elimination after another rang out, a sense of gloom settled over the place. Number 361, Victoria Vance, stepped forward hearing her name. Victoria stepped out from the crowd and shouted, present at the instructor's signal. She sat in the rotating chair. The machine started instantly, and Victoria felt her body lift off the ground as the world spun around her. 10 minutes later, Victoria stepped steadily from the chair. Everyone present stared, wide-eyed. Others had stumbled off vomiting, but Victoria's body didn't even sway. But the next moment left them even more dumbfounded. They watched as Victoria, holding a paddle, walked in a perfectly straight line and deposited a ping-pong ball into a beaker at the far end of the room. So far, she was the first person to succeed. Number 361, Victoria Vance, you have passed the second round, Victoria smiled faintly. She had always had a high tolerance for motion sickness roller coasters, and giant pendulum rides were child's play. And she had been practicing at the park for weeks. In the end, 10 people passed the recruitment, 8 men and 2 women. The 10 of them would enter the flight academy in a week for 3 semesters of training. The other woman came over to greet Victoria happily. This is great, I never thought there'd be another girl besides me. Victoria smiled and replied with conviction, I believe that in the future, there will be more and more female pilots. The sky was dotted with stars. Victoria dragged her exhausted but elated body home. As she passed a dark alley, she heard the sound of Sincere and Melody arguing. Sincere, are you still thinking about Victoria? Why haven't you divorced her to marry me yet? Victoria didn't slow her pace, but Sincere's reply still drifted to her on the wind. I love you. Just give me a little more time. Feeling the weight of the Air Force acceptance letter in her pocket, Victoria looked up at the starlight and smiled faintly. Her future was freedom, flight, a life dedicated to serving her country. That future was a long and distant road, and Sincere would not be on it, so there was no need to linger. All she had to do was move forward. The day before the Harvest Festival. Early in the morning, Martha was busy preparing things for the ancestral rites. Seeing her mother-in-law occupied, Victoria spoke quietly to Sincere, should we go get the divorce certificate this afternoon? The hand Sincere was using to arrange paper money froze. His throat tightened, and he instinctively made an excuse. Let's wait a little longer. Mom just got out of the hospital. The doctor said she can't handle any stress. Hearing this, Victoria frowned. If they couldn't get it now, she would have to wait until her summer break. But Martha's health was indeed fragile. Victoria glanced at her mother-in-law. She wrestled with the decision for a moment before finally agreeing. All right. It would end in divorce eventually, so sooner or later made no difference. Right now, the most important thing was reporting to the Air Force Flight Academy. Hearing Victoria agree, Sincere let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The 3 of them sat down for a rare family meal together. Martha was overjoyed, raising her glass. Come on, let's have a toast. I just hope you two grow closer and closer." The three of them raised their glasses. Before they could clink, there was a sudden knock on the door. Victoria went to open it. To her shock, it was Melody. She was carrying a gift, her eyes looking at Victoria with a provocative glint. "Happy holidays, I came to bring a gift." Victoria was stunned. It was funny, really. In their past life, the two of them had never confronted each other directly because Melody had always played the part of a fragile woman hiding behind Sincere. So Victoria never expected the Melody of this life to be so impatient. After speaking, Melody pushed past Victoria and sauntered into the living room, smiling at Sincere. "Brother Shaw, I came especially to visit your mother." Before she could finish, an enraged Martha grabbed a broom and started swinging it at her. "You shameless hussy, you little tramp, how dare you show your face in my house?" Sincere rushed forward to shield Melody. "Mom, stop hitting her." Seeing this, Martha grew even angrier, and the broom landed mercilessly on Sincere's back instead. After a chaotic scene, seeing Martha gasping for breath, Victoria stepped in to stop her. "Mom, that's enough." Sincere let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Victoria, his eyes avoiding hers. I'll take her home and be right back." With that, he escorted the weeping Melody out of the house, leaving behind a trashed living room. Martha slammed her hand on the table. "How did I give birth to such a disgrace?" Victoria felt helpless. She had wanted a peaceful farewell, but it had turned into this. After cleaning up the messy living room, Victoria went to her room to pack, hesitating, unsure how to tell Martha she was leaving. Just then, there was a knock on the door. The door opened, and Martha's eyes immediately fell on the luggage next to Victoria. Victoria froze. After a long silence, Martha just sighed deeply. "If you want to go, then go. Vicky, you've suffered these past few days." So, Martha had known all along that she was going to leave. Victoria's eyes instantly turned red. "Mom, I didn't know how to tell you." Hearing this, Martha's voice also choked up. "I know everything. You're a good child. It's Sincere who has wronged you." That night, Victoria slept with Martha, and they talked for a long time. Sincere never came back. The next morning, Victoria got up and washed her face. She glanced at the sleeping Martha, then picked up her bag and prepared to leave. Just as she reached the living room, the door was suddenly pushed open, and Sincere walked in. He was carrying a takeout box with a roast duck inside. Seeing Victoria, he immediately explained, "Melody was hurt, so I stayed at the hospital with her last night." A man and a woman, alone all night, they were all adults. Who would believe that explanation? But Victoria didn't care anymore. Seeing Sincere about to say more, she cut him off. "I'm leaving." Sincere's explanation got stuck in his throat. He paused, then said, "I'll save the roast duck then. We can eat it together when you get back tonight." Victoria didn't answer. She opened the door and walked straight out. At noon, at the Air Force Flight Academy in the outskirts of the capital. Victoria, dressed in a standard-issue Air Force uniform, took part in the new recruit enlistment ceremony. 10 recruits stood in a neat row. Facing the national flag, Victoria raised her fist to her temple and swore the oath with a solemn expression. "I swear to voluntarily become a soldier of the party and the nation. If there is a war, I will answer the call, I will be ready to fight, and I will be victorious." Meanwhile, back in the city. The roast duck on the table had gone cold, and Victoria still hadn't returned. Sincere got up to look for her. He went to the garment factory, where she worked, and said to the old gatekeeper, "Sir, could you please call Victoria Vance out?" The old man frowned and looked Sincere up and down, recognizing him as the man at the center of the recent affair gossip. "Victoria quit a long time ago," he said gruffly. "Go look for her somewhere else." Sincere was stunned. He just stood there, a look of confusion on his face. Victoria quit? Why did she quit? These thoughts flashed through his mind. He tried to think where she might have gone, but since his rebirth, all his thoughts had been on Melody. For a moment, he had no idea where to even begin looking for Victoria. After standing there for a long time, he could only go home again. As he looked up, he saw that Martha was already awake, sitting in the living room, staring blankly in the direction of Victoria's room. The air seemed thick with sadness. A knot tightened in Sincere's chest. He strode in, his voice hoarse. "Mom, where did Victoria go?" Martha looked over, her gaze cool. "She left," she said curtly. "She joined the military." Hearing this, Sincere's pupils contracted. "The military? Why didn't she tell me she was joining the military? Martha sneered. Why would she tell you? You were so busy with that hussy. Do you even have a wife in your eyes? Good riddance. After saying this, Martha didn't want to look at him anymore and went back to her room. Sincere stood in the middle of the house, his mind in turmoil. The military was so tough. Could Victoria handle it? Would she ever come back? Wait, they weren't divorced yet. Victoria would definitely have to come back. In his last life, he had desperately wanted a divorce to get away from her. In this life, their marriage had become his last straw to hold on to. Sincere thought that when she came back, he would have a proper talk with her. He never imagined that he would have to wait 3 years. 3 years later. In the sky, the clouds stretched out like an endless sea. A Starfare supersonic fighter jet suddenly appeared, performing a breathtakingly difficult barrel roll through the white clouds, a stunning visual spectacle. In the control tower, the pilots from Victoria's cohort were amazed by the sight. Victoria is incredible, an ace pilot indeed. She makes those impossible maneuvers look easy. Every time I watch, I get fired up. I hope I can fly a Starfare jet soon. The Starfare was the nation's first independently developed supersonic fighter. The flight requirements were strict, and not just anyone could fly it. Every pilot took pride in the prospect of flying one. The instructor glanced at the chattering pilots and, suppressing a smile, pretended to scold them. Quiet down, what is this, a playground? The room fell silent. Then, the instructor turned to a man who had been silent the whole time. Engineer Grant, we have enough test data. Requesting permission for number 361 to return. The man was handsome, with a cool, reserved expression, his eyes glued to the flight display on the monitor. He was the chief engineer for the Starfare fighter jet Orion Grant. Hearing the instructor, he paused, then picked up the radio handset. Number 361, come in. In the cockpit of the fighter jet, Victoria heard the voice and hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she responded immediately. Number 361, received. Awaiting orders, sir. A year and a half ago, Victoria had graduated with outstanding marks and had been handpicked by Orion Grant to be a test pilot for the new aircraft. Orion's slightly hoarse voice came over the radio. Excellent work on the test flight. The runway is clear. Return to base immediately. His clear voice had a gravelly quality. Even though she had heard it many times, Victoria still found it incredibly pleasant. The thought was fleeting. Roger that, she replied. After responding, Victoria began to maneuver the jet for its descent. The Starfare landed smoothly on the base. After deplaning and changing, Victoria received a call from the communications officer. Vance, your husband, Sincere Shaw, is here to see you. Go to conference room 5. Sincere is here. For a moment, Victoria thought she had misheard. This was a classified Air Force base. He wasn't military personnel or a technician. How could he possibly get in? Puzzled, Victoria went to ask her superior. The officer looked at her, surprised. You don't know. Your husband acquired a machinery factory and accidentally developed a special material suitable for fighter jets. The military absorbed his factory. He's now a sizable military industrial contractor. She knew Sincere would be successful, but she never imagined he would become so successful that he'd be directly integrated into the national defense industry. After getting her answer, Victoria changed course and headed for conference room 5. At the door, she didn't immediately push it open. Instead, she peered through the small, 4-inch glass window. At the long, empty table, Sincere sat on one side, his back straight, leaning forward, his hands clasped together. It was a posture of extreme tension. After years in the military, Victoria had developed a habit of observing people's body language. Her gaze slowly traveled up. The man's sharp, handsome features came into view. He had phoenix eyes that tilted upwards, giving him a piercing, formidable look. Now, perhaps due to nervousness, his eyes were slightly downcast, softening his intense aura. Victoria sighed to herself. Sincere has changed a little. 3 years had made him seem more composed. The thought was fleeting. Victoria pushed the door open. Their eyes met. Sincere's flickered, and his tall frame slowly rose to his feet. He suppressed his emotions, his eyes fixed on her for a long time. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. At least, it did for Sincere. He looked at her, holding his breath, afraid she would vanish in the next second. 3 years? For 3 whole years, Victoria hadn't come back once, not even a single letter. He felt an irrational anger, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. He knew she had joined the military, but he didn't know which branch until his factory was acquired. He had used his status as her spouse to inquire and found out she was an Air Force test pilot. To see her, he had submitted a request 6 months in advance, going through layers of approvals and security checks just to get in. The setting sun streamed through the window, casting an orange glow over them. They stood across the table, looking at each other for a long time. Neither of them spoke. Victoria didn't know what to say, and Sincere had forgotten what he wanted to say. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. "Is there something you need?" Her voice seemed to bring Sincere back to his senses. His lips parted slowly. "It's been 3 years. I can finally see you." His tone was almost nostalgic. Victoria lowered her eyes, unsure of his intentions. The next moment, Sincere spoke again. "Why? Did you leave without saying goodbye?" Without saying goodbye? Victoria blinked. It suddenly occurred to her that now that she was in the military, the divorce process would be complicated. Sincere had probably come to rush her into signing the papers. It was her own fault. She had been so busy with training for the past 3 years that she hadn't had time to think about anything else. A look of realization dawned on her face. "I left in a hurry, I forgot. Did I hold you and Melody up?" Victoria was about to bring up the divorce, but Sincere cut her off abruptly. "No, it's not what you think." His words made her swallow the sentence she was about to say. The room fell silent again. Just then, there was a knock on the still open door. They looked toward the sound and saw a man with refined features and an extremely stoic expression standing in the doorway. It was the fighter jet's chief designer, Orion Grant. He was nearly 6'2", with a perfect build. He stood there, looking at the two people in the room, his light brown eyes unreadable. Orion said coolly, "The door was open, so I came in. Victoria, where's the test flight data?" Victoria looked at him, surprised. After a test flight, the data was always handed over to the instructor. Didn't Orion know that? Why was he asking her? But he was her superior. Victoria cleared her throat and replied, "It's with Instructor Liu, sir." Orion nodded. "I see." As he turned to leave, his gaze swept indifferently over Sincere. Between men, few words were needed. In that single glance, Sincere felt a wave of hostility. They were complete strangers. The only reason for his hostility could be Victoria. Sincere glanced at Victoria. He took a deep breath and tried to ask calmly, "Who is he?" Though he tried to keep his voice steady, a hint of his true feelings bled through. The accusatory tone slipped out, and Sincere felt a pang of regret, but Victoria didn't seem to notice. In fact, her eyes lit up. "He's brilliant, but his identity is classified." "I can't tell you." When Victoria talked about this man, her eyes shone. Although it was only admiration, it still made Sincere's chest tighten. The clock struck 6. After flying for so long under extreme pressure, Victoria was starving. "Want to get something to eat at the mess hall?" she suggested. Sincere wanted to talk more with her, so he nodded. "Okay." On the way, many people stared at them. When they got their food in the mess hall, the gazes became even more blatant. "Wow, who's that guy? The comms officer said he's Victoria's husband." "What? Victoria's married? Then why hasn't she been home in 3 years?" "I don't know, but her husband is pretty handsome. Not as handsome as me, though." "Get out of here." Victoria knew they were gossiping but wasn't annoyed. They had been in a closed environment for so long with little entertainment, so gossip was their main pastime. They meant no harm and wouldn't say anything nasty. After getting their food, Victoria and Sincere sat across from each other. She was so hungry she started inhaling her meal. Sincere was much more refined, chewing slowly. Seeing how fast she was eating, he got up and poured her a glass of water. His eyes held a hint of pain. "Slow down. Your training must be exhausting." Victoria took a sip. With food in her stomach, she finally slowed down. "I'm used to it," she said, unconcerned. Sincere studied Victoria's face, noticing she had changed a lot. She was a little tanner, but her posture was straighter, and her eyes were always bright, radiating a kind of raw, natural beauty. It looked like she was happy. Seeing her like this, the words Sincere wanted to say got stuck in his throat. They made small talk for a while before Sincere finally couldn't hold back any longer. "Being a test pilot is too dangerous. Have you considered becoming a regular pilot? Or a commercial pilot? Anything is better than a test pilot." Test pilots were different from regular pilots. A new fighter jet had to be tested by a test pilot before it could be put into service. If something went wrong, it was a life or death situation. Every test flight was a dance with death. Every time Sincere heard that Victoria was preparing for a new test flight, his heart clenched. He was terrified of hearing bad news. Hearing this, Victoria paused, then smiled faintly. Some things just have to be done, even if they're dangerous. But Sincere tried to persuade her further, but Victoria cut him off, her tone firm. Don't try to convince me. Our country's Air Force is still developing. It's not easy to train a talent. I have good grades and good skills. If I don't do it, who will? Sincere was momentarily stunned. In that moment, Victoria seemed to glow, radiating a sacred, noble aura. Finally, Sincere relented. It's almost the new year, he said in a low voice. You should go see Mom. Her health hasn't been good. Victoria paused, thinking of Martha's health. She found herself nodding. All right, I'll submit a leave request. It'll take a few days to get approved. After dinner, Victoria prepared to submit her request and parted ways with Sincere. Soon, she had handed in the form. As she came out, she ran into Orion Grant in the hallway. Thinking that she wouldn't be able to test any new aircraft for a while, Victoria thought she should inform the chief designer. She walked over and greeted him. Engineer Grant, I'm planning to go home for a bit. Just wanted to let you know. Orion grunted in acknowledgement, then asked in a casual tone, when will you be back? I'll be back after the new year. Victoria's reply was brisk. She didn't notice the flicker in Orion's eyes. He frowned slightly, displeased. That long? Then, as if he saw something, his expression changed, and he asked abruptly, you said before that you couldn't get divorced because of new recruit training. Are you planning to get divorced this time? Victoria had planned on it, so she nodded. She didn't notice that around the corner, Sincere, who should have left, was still standing there. His hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists. Sincere stared at Victoria's back, a rebellious voice screaming in his mind. No, he would not agree to a divorce. Watching Victoria chat happily with another man, Sincere's emotions were a tangled mess. She was smiling so brightly. It was a smile he hadn't seen directed at him in this life or the last. Something had fundamentally changed. His visitor pass was for 3 days. He had planned to tell Victoria, but seeing this scene, his feet felt as if they were weighted down with lead. He couldn't take a single step. Late at night, Sincere lay in the base's guest room, replaying the scene in his mind, his heart sinking. In a daze, he suddenly remembered. Victoria had once smiled at him just as happily. But that memory was so distant, so faded, that it took him a long time to recall it. It was from their past life. In the 10 years after they married, they had been very happy. But everything changed after that 10th year. He had cheated, and Victoria, her heart broken, had chosen to leave. Although he had broken things off with Melody now, how could he ever win back a person's heart? The next day, Victoria assumed Sincere had left. But she ran into him again at the mess hall. She saw him in the distance, dressed in a simple shirt, chatting happily with her instructor. They seemed to be getting along well. Victoria walked over. Before she could speak, the instructor clicked his tongue at her. Vance, your husband is here for a 3-day visit. Why'd you just leave him hanging? 3 days? Sincere hadn't mentioned that when they parted yesterday. Victoria was stunned, a little bewildered. She glanced at Sincere, who had a slight smile on his lips. She knew he had omitted it on purpose. Just then, the instructor waved his hand. I'm giving you the day off. Take him on a tour of the residential area. The other classified areas are off limits. The residential area was completely enclosed, so an outsider couldn't photograph anything sensitive from there. It was permissible for a tour. A soldier must obey orders. Even if she didn't want to, Victoria had to comply. She saluted helplessly. Yes, sir, wanting to get the tour over with as quickly as possible, Victoria strode forward. This is the training ground, this is the women's dormitory. Sincere followed quietly behind her. As they passed a certain area, they heard the sound of footsteps. She looked up toward the sound. It was the men's bathhouse. Orion Grant was just walking out, his short hair damp and plastered to his forehead, dissipating some of his usual cold aura. Their eyes met, and they nodded to each other in greeting. Victoria didn't think much of the interlude, but it stuck in Sincere's mind. He thought about it idly. They've been around each other this long and no sparks have flown. Victoria probably doesn't even like him. At this thought, a small smile touched his lips. He was currently Victoria's husband in name. As long as he was around, no one could openly pursue her. The day passed quickly. Victoria went to train, and Sincere wandered around by himself. Seeing that her leave request hadn't been approved, Sincere was puzzled and went to ask her instructor. The instructor said bluntly, "I approved it, but Engineer Grant hasn't signed off on it." Orion Grant again. Sincere pressed his lips together, extremely displeased. During lunch, he went to the mess hall to intercept him. Soon, Orion Grant appeared. Sincere blocked his path. "Can we talk?" Orion glanced at him, grunted, and turned to walk outside. "Tusk." Sincere watched Orion's back, deeply annoyed, but he followed. When they reached a corner, Orion stopped. Sincere spoke first. "Mr. Grant, why haven't you approved my wife's leave request?" Orion turned, his cold eyes glancing at him. The look was slightly dismissive, like he was looking at trash. Sincere's displeasure grew, and he frowned, about to say something when Orion spoke. "Wife," he smiled, his meaning unclear. "A man who cheats during his marriage is worthy of that title?" Sincere's face changed instantly, his aura turning cold. "This is our private family matter. It's none of your business." Though he retorted, he sounded more blustering than confident. Only he knew how little ground he had to stand on when he said that. Seeing this, Orion just smiled faintly. "I'll approve her leave when you're gone." Orion was clearly using this to his advantage, deliberately making him squirm. Sincere gave him a long, hard look, then sneered. "Fine, then I'll wait for her outside the base." With that, Sincere prepared to leave. As he turned, he suppressed his churning emotions and threw a parting shot over his shoulder. "Remember, I'm her legal husband." "Husband?" A flash of annoyance crossed Orion's eyes, gone in an instant. Not for long. As soon as Sincere left the base, Orion leisurely signed the papers and went to find Victoria. He handed her the report. "Your leave is approved. I'll have someone drive you." The great and busy Orion Grant was delivering it personally. Victoria took it, surprised. "No need for a ride, I'll just go with Sincere." The airbase wasn't far from the city, only a 5-hour drive. Victoria had already arranged with Sincere to go back together. Orion smiled, a strange, secretive smile like a fox that had stolen a chicken. He suppressed his laughter and said in a muffled tone, "He seemed to have something to do. He's already left." Sincere left on his own. Victoria was confused for a moment, then quickly dismissed it. "All right, then I'll catch a ride with a comrade." She immediately packed her bags and set off. The jeep slowly drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Sincere, waiting at the gate of the airbase, knew nothing. By the time he found out, Victoria had been gone for an hour. Tricked again. Sincere gritted his teeth, having been outmaneuvered due to a lack of information. Fortunately, there was only one road back to the city. He should still be able to catch up. He got into his sedan and said to the driver, "Let's go, back to the city." Meanwhile, Victoria sat in the jeep, gazing at the smooth road ahead. "The country is developing so fast," she marveled. "This road was built so quickly." The driver, a young comrade named Corporal Lee, grinned proudly. "Of course, a new spring of progress is blowing across the land. Our country is changing every day. You haven't been out in 3 years. You should take a good look around." Victoria nodded emphatically, a look of longing on her face. Although she had seen the world 20 years in the future in her past life, being reborn and watching her motherland improve day by day filled her with eager anticipation. The long journey was tiring. The corporal pulled over for a break. During the lull, they built a small fire and roasted sweet potatoes. They were warm and delicious. Corporal Lee's eyes darted around, and he suddenly started gossiping. "Comrade Vance, why haven't you been home in 3 years? Is it true what they say, that you and your husband don't get along?" Hearing this, Victoria stopped chewing. Her gaze grew distant for a moment as she stared at the reddening horizon in silence. Just then, the sound of a car braking sharply came from the road behind them. A screech. Victoria snapped back to the present and continued answering Corporal Lee's question. "We have no feelings for each other. We were planning to divorce, but things kept getting in the way." "Maybe fate doesn't want you to divorce. Do you still love him?" Corporal Lee's question made Victoria fall silent. Sincere, rushing to catch up, finally saw Victoria's figure. He got out of the car, and just as he was about to call out to her, he heard her words drift to him on the wind. "I don't love him anymore." His feet froze in place. Sincere stood there, a piece of his heart seeming to chip away. The wind felt so cold, whistling through the empty space. The driver's voice came from behind him. "Sir, what's wrong?" Sincere snapped back to his senses, pretending he hadn't heard anything. He called out to Victoria, who had her back to him. "Vicky, isn't that Sincere's voice?" Victoria turned in surprise and saw him standing behind her. The cold wind howled, but even in a heavy military coat, he looked as handsome as ever. Then it occurred to her, did Sincere hear what I just said? Her mind raced as she got up and greeted him. "I thought you left. What are you doing here?" At the same time, her eyes subconsciously studied him, but he looked completely calm, so calm she couldn't even read the expression in his eyes. Sincere strode over until he was standing in front of her. "I was waiting for you at the base gate." Huh, why would he be waiting for her at the gate? Victoria was puzzled, but she suddenly remembered Orion Grant's strange behavior. She had known Orion for a year and a half and had a good grasp of his personality. He held a grudge. He was probably getting back at Sincere for her. Once, after drinking too much, she had accidentally told him about her marriage. The training pressure must have been too much because she had started crying. Orion was different after a few drinks, too. Seeing her cry, his usual cool demeanor vanished, replaced by a flustered panic. He had said, "If I ever run into that scoundrel, I'll teach him a lesson for you." She never thought he'd actually keep his word. A small smile played on Victoria's lips. She said nothing more, just gestured. "Sit down, have something to eat." Seeing this, Sincere's eyes darkened. He stared at the smile on her lips, finding it incredibly jarring. Who is she thinking about? The four of them sat around the fire. Corporal Lee glanced curiously at Sincere. Speak of the devil, he handed a sweet potato over. "Comrade, have something to warm you up." Sincere glanced at it and slowly took it. "Thank you." Then, his long, distinct fingers peeled away the charred skin, and he broke off a large piece, handing it to Victoria. "For you." Victoria paused for a second before taking it. The firelight danced on her face, making her look beautiful. In a daze, Sincere was suddenly transported back to his past life, to the most difficult days. They had lost everything they owned in a scam and were tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Creditors came to their door every day. Back then, that kind of money was a fortune. They huddled in a drafty rental, shivering from the cold, with only a few cents to their name. A large steamed bun cost 5 cents. He had bought one bun and a packet of rat poison, planning for them to die together. That day, as usual, he gave the larger half to Victoria. It was his habit. But that time, Victoria didn't take it. She divided the bun equally between them. She had said, "Before, when things were good, you gave me the bigger half because you loved me. Now, we share it equally, and that's also love. After we eat, we'll go wash dishes tomorrow. Let's put the business on hold and just focus on surviving." Her words were simple, but they had reignited the flame of hope in Sincere's heart. He threw away his half of the bun. Victoria didn't ask why. They went to bed hungry that night, and before dawn the next day, they were out looking for work. And from that, all their later wealth and success had been born. But he had forgotten all that later. In this moment, Sincere truly wanted to curse himself. After their break, the group prepared to set off again. Sincere insisted on squeezing into Victoria's car. They sat side by side in the back. As the car swayed, Victoria's eyelids grew heavy. The sunset faded from the horizon. Suddenly, a screech of brakes tore through the air. The car lurched to a halt, and Victoria, jolted awake, was thrown forward. She was about to slam into the seat in front of her. A strong arm shot out, bracing her. Victoria collided with it, then found herself enveloped in a warm embrace. "What's happening?" Startled, Victoria looked up to see Sincere staring down at her, his gaze intense. His warm breath drew closer. Victoria's pupils constricted. She tried to push him away, but in her haste, her elbow struck him squarely in the jaw. "Ah, hey," Sincere grunted in pain. Now free, Victoria let out a sigh of relief and looked at him again. He was clutching his jaw, his eyes filled with a complex, pained expression. "Do you hate me that much?" Victoria felt a bit awkward. She rubbed her nose and explained, "You came at me so suddenly. My body's muscle memory is to react defensively. It's a soldier thing." She didn't know if he believed her. She glanced at him. He lowered his hand, revealing a swollen jaw. Ouch, it looked pretty bad. Victoria felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry, we'll get it checked out when we get into the city." Sincere glanced at her without a word, then turned to look out the window, lost in thought. A few hours later, the Jeep reached the city. The car was heading toward her rental apartment when Sincere gave another address. "Comrade, please head to Highbridge Street." It was the address of Sincere's old family home. Victoria was stunned. "The house?" she asked without thinking. Sincere turned and gave her a heavy look. "Didn't you say this house held a lot of memories? I bought it back." She had said that, but that was in her past life. Back then, selling the old house had been a necessity, and it had broken her heart. The house had witnessed their entire relationship, from dating to marriage. It was proof of their love, and Victoria had always wanted to buy it back. But Sincere had always told her to wait. They had waited for 10 years until the house was demolished. They never bought it back. Lost in memory, Victoria had no desire to speak. Soon, the car reached the entrance to the old alley. Martha was already waiting. As Victoria got out of the car, Martha rushed forward, her eyes red. She was smiling and scolding at the same time. 3 years you finally remembered to come back. In just 3 years, Martha's hair had grown much whiter. Victoria's eyes instantly reddened. "Mom, I'm so sorry." 1,000 words were condensed into one apology. Martha wiped her moist eyes and took Victoria's hand, leading her inside. "You must be hungry. Mom cooked a feast just waiting for you." Victoria didn't forget to invite Corporal Lee. "Come eat with us." Sincere, carrying the luggage, also chimed in. "Come on in." Not wanting to be rude, Corporal Lee rubbed his nose and followed them sheepishly. "It's over, Engineer Grant," he thought. "I don't think you have a chance. These three are like a real family. A divorce seems unlikely." Inside, the familiar wooden table and chairs were laden with dishes. There was fish and meat, more lavish than a New Year's feast. It was all from Martha's heart. During this rare reunion after 3 long years, Martha was overjoyed. She wanted to propose a toast, but then remembered something and put her glass down. She smiled at Corporal Lee. "Corporal Lee, how's my daughter-in-law doing in the military?" At this, Corporal Lee perked up, giving a thumbs up. "Ma'am, Comrade Vance is top-notch. A whole troop of guys can't compare to her. Whether it's academics or training, she's always at the top of the class. In just 3 years, she's been promoted to captain. With the right opportunity, she's sure to become a general." He was laying it on a bit thick. Victoria cleared her throat, signaling for him to tone it down. He grinned sheepishly and fell silent. She had expected Martha to be proud, but instead, her eyes reddened on the spot. "It must be so dangerous, so hard." Martha's pained gaze fell on her, and Victoria's nose tingled. "Others only cared how high you flew. Only family worried if you were tired from flying. Being a pilot was exhausting, the pressure immense. Dancing with death every day, how could she not be a little afraid?" She just tried not to think about it. As she was lost in thought, a warm hand clasped hers. She paused. It was Sincere's hand. She looked up and saw him offering a comforting smile, as if trying to give her a little warmth. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Corporal Lee raised his glass, trying to liven things up. "Come on, today's a good day, let's have a toast." Just as he lifted his glass, there was another knock on the door. Corporal Lee was closest, so he instinctively got up to open it. He looked puzzled at the person standing there. "Who are you?" Everyone looked over. A frail-looking Melody Holmes stood in the doorway. "Hello, comrade, is Brother Shaw back?" Martha pushed Corporal Lee aside and slammed the door shut. That hussy was such a buzzkill. Martha cursed inwardly, then forced a stiff smile. Eat, don't mind her." Victoria was finally home. She couldn't let that trollop ruin it, but just as the thought crossed her mind, the door was knocked on again. Bang, bang, bang. It was accompanied by Melody's tearful voice. "Brother Shaw, you're back, aren't you? Please, let me see you." The room fell deadly silent. Victoria glanced once, then looked away, as if she was used to it. Sincere's face darkened instantly. He pressed his lips together and explained to Victoria, "I broke things off with her a long time ago." After Victoria had left, Sincere had seen Melody's true colors. When she found out about his massive debt, she had become a different person. Her words were sharp. "You owe that much money and you still want to marry me? In your dreams. Don't come looking for me again. I'd rather marry a pig butcher than you." Money was a powerful thing. It could make a person put on an act for a decade. The Melody of his past life had probably only been interested in his money too. The contrast made him realize how terribly wrong he had been. When he made his fortune again, Melody came crawling back, which only annoyed him more. Hearing his explanation, Victoria gave him a surprised look. Broke it off? They had been entangled for 10 years in the last life. How did they break up so quickly this time? If they had broken up, why was Melody still showing up at his door? The meaning in her gaze was all too clear. Sincere understood. To prove himself, he got up, opened the door, and spat a single word at the tear-stained Melody. Scram! Melody was quickly driven away. Victoria didn't dwell on the incident. She had come back this time to get a divorce. Sincere's affairs were no longer her concern, but Corporal Lee's mind was racing. After dinner, he went out and sent a telegram to Orion Grant. Situation urgent. Come quickly. 1984 New Year's Eve. At the entrance to the alley, Sincere lit a string of firecrackers, then covered his ears and ran to Victoria's side. Crack, crack, pop, the sound of firecrackers welcomed the new year. He glanced sideways and saw Victoria watching intently, not even covering her ears. "Doesn't that hurt your ears?" he asked. Victoria tilted her head back and smiled. "The sound of flying is much louder than this." The firecrackers stopped. Sincere lowered his hands and suddenly asked, "You really love the sky, don't you?" Victoria nodded. "I do." Hearing her answer, Sincere glanced at the spent firecrackers, then at the night sky. An idea began to form. He was going to prepare a surprise. He was going to win Victoria back. A moment later, he had disappeared. Victoria, completely unaware, was busy entertaining Orion Grant. On the simple, rustic bed, Orion sat with his long legs drawn up, looking a bit constrained. He was from the south and wasn't used to the northern-style heated beds. Victoria poured him a cup of tea, suppressing a smile. "Have some tea, Engineer Grant. What brings you here all of a sudden on New Year's Eve?" Orion glanced at her smiling lips, and his own lips curved upwards. "Just came to pay a visit. Is that not allowed?" Of course it's allowed." They chatted for a while, and then Orion took out a document. "You left this behind." Seeing the divorce papers, Victoria exclaimed, "Oh, I didn't bring them." She took the papers. It was indeed hers, with her signature on it. She must have forgotten it while packing. Just then, Sincere's voice called from outside. "Vicky, come out here, quick." Victoria paused, instinctively glancing at Orion. She didn't even know why she looked at him. But Orion just pressed his lips together and said coolly, "Go on." So, Victoria, holding the divorce papers, went outside, completely unprepared. The next second, a loud bang echoed through the night sky. Startled, Victoria looked up. The scene before her left her speechless. Brilliant fireworks exploded in the night, blooming like flowers. They fell like shooting stars. Lost in the moment, Sincere approached her, holding a bouquet of roses. His expression was incredibly gentle. "Vicky, I love you. Can we start over?" She hadn't seen this side of Sincere in a very long time. But for Victoria, this wasn't a surprise. It was a shock. Her hand, holding the papers, tightened. She had planned to talk to Sincere after the new year, but given the situation, she couldn't wait any longer. With that thought, Victoria didn't take the flowers. Instead, she held out the divorce papers. Her voice was firm. "Sincere, sign the divorce papers." The air suddenly went still. Sincere stared at the paper in front of him, his mind blank. A single thought echoed in his head. Victoria doesn't want him anymore. She was in the Air Force. As her spouse, it was already difficult for him to see her. If they divorced, where would he even find her? A wave of panic washed over him like a tidal wave. He stood frozen, the feeling of suffocation in his chest nearly stopping his breath. After a long moment, Sincere finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Vicky, I was wrong. I do love you. It was my fault before." Hearing those words, if this had been before the divorce in her past life, she might have hesitated. But now it just gave her a headache. Her tone grew impatient. "Sincere, let it go." But Sincere refused to sign. He just stood there, his head lowered stubbornly, a clear expression of refusal. As they stood in a standoff, Sincere caught sight of someone out of the corner of his eye who shouldn't have been there. A man leaning against the doorframe, watching the show. Wasn't it Orion Grant? Sincere's brow furrowed, his tone accusatory. "What are you doing here?" Did Orion see the whole thing, being rejected in front of his rival? Sincere's bitterness was instantly swept away, replaced by another indescribable emotion. But his face remained impassive, his eyes fixed coldly on Orion. Orion looked back, their gazes meeting, a flicker of contempt in his eyes. The air crackled with tension. The atmosphere was oppressive. Victoria watched for a long time, then sighed. Sincere, just sign it. Didn't you always want to be free of me? Her words shifted Sincere's mood from anger to hesitation. He pressed his lips together and said hoarsely, I lost my way before. I know now how wrong I was. Can't you give me one more chance? Victoria wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. She had waited 2 lifetimes for these words. During the 10 years of turmoil in her past life, she had thought countless times that Sincere would regret losing her. But all she ever saw was him with another woman. Once, she had loved him dearly. But she had loved the Sincere of her 20s, the one who cared for her, respected her, and cherished her. Not this man. Regardless of why he broke up with Melody, she didn't care anymore. Victoria just wanted to end this marriage as quickly as possible. At this point, she felt no love or hate for him, only the indifference one feels for a stranger. Their only remaining tie was his mother. But she was his mother, after all. The most Victoria could do was visit her when she had time. Beyond that, she had done all she could. Reborn into a new life, her future had never included Sincere. Let's part on good terms, she said softly. Don't make this ugly. It's not like you'll die without me. Hearing this, Sincere froze. The words were all too familiar. They were the same words he had said to her when they divorced in their past life. The boomerang had come back to hit him in this life. His eyes were filled with bitterness. His tall frame swayed. After a long moment, he managed to force out the words. I'll agree, but first, come with me to one place. Please. Sincere was a man who valued his dignity. He always restrained himself from showing any emotion. But in this moment, his eyes were a complex mix of emotions, a plea and a glimmer of hope. Please. Victoria knew she had no choice. Only by going could she make him give up for good. After a moment, Victoria moved her lips. All right. Hearing her reply, a flicker of excitement crossed Sincere's eyes. He suppressed it and said, okay. That night, Orion prepared to leave. Before he left, he looked at Victoria, who had come to see him off. He saw the dazed look in her eyes and frowned. You're not actually thinking of forgiving him, are you? If that were the case, Orion really wanted to shake her and ask if she'd lost her mind. Hearing him, Victoria snapped back to reality and chuckled. What are you thinking? It's been over between us for a long time. I only agreed to go with him to make him give up for good. Orion was satisfied. Good. If you need anything, let me know. Okay. Their eyes met, and then Orion turned to leave. The next day, Sincere took Victoria to a basement early in the morning. The small, dark basement made Victoria feel a momentary sense of disorientation. Sincere's voice came from behind her. I rented this place specially and made it look like our old rental in the city. I think we were most in love during those days. She had thought Sincere might take her to the place where they first met or where he proposed. She had never imagined he would bring her here. This basement did look a lot like the place they had rented in their past life. A room just big enough for a small bed, with the toilet and kitchen separated by a single door, so cramped that a single turn could make you bump into each other. Sincere and Victoria sat on the bed in silence. After a long time, Sincere got up and brought out a bowl of pickled vegetables and a steamed bun. He placed them on the small table on the bed, his voice heavy. I'm sorry. You suffered so much with me back then. Victoria's eyes flickered. Her calm heart was stirred by his words. For some reason, tears began to stream down her face. Those days had been so hard that she thought she might starve to death the next day. But she had never regretted it, because the Sincere of that time had been worth it. For her, he would have starved himself to give her food. No one who hasn't truly experienced hunger can understand that kind of gratitude. But the Sincere who came after was different. He had money, and he no longer saw her. After a decade of turmoil, she finally regretted it. She shouldn't have wasted her time. How many decades does a person get in a lifetime? Victoria's tears were for her lost decade, for her misplaced devotion. Seeing her cry, Sincere panicked for a rare moment, hesitantly reaching out to hold her. But Victoria dodged him. She wiped away her tears, her expression completely calm. None of that matters anymore. I just want to end our relationship as soon as possible. Her cold words echoed in the basement. Sincere's eyelashes trembled, his eyes filled with hurt. We were so in love before, Victoria sneered. You seem to have forgotten. You once said I was nothing compared to Melody, that all I did was scream and act like a madwoman. At her words, a flicker of guilt crossed Sincere's eyes. He paused for a long time before saying hoarsely, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Hit me, curse me, do whatever you want. As long as it makes you happy, I'll do anything." How ironic. The man who wouldn't even look at her in their past life was now bowing his head, endlessly apologizing. Scenes from her past life flashed before her eyes. He had said, "You're acting like a madwoman. You're too greedy. Isn't half the family fortunate enough for you to agree to a divorce? Can't you just let go? What's the point of dragging this out?" Again and again, his cold words had pierced her heart. And Sincere had just left her with his cold, retreating back. She had doubted herself so many times. Am I ugly? Am I old? Is that why Sincere doesn't love me anymore? But later, Victoria had finally seen the truth. It wasn't her fault. You can never hold on to someone who wants to leave. The only mistake she had made was dragging it out for 10 years before getting a divorce. And now, in this new life, she didn't want to waste her youth any longer. She needed to make Sincere let go himself. With that thought, Victoria looked up. "You say you love me. That you do anything?" At her words, Sincere was like a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood. A look of hope appeared on his face. "Yes, I'll do anything." He must have thought that reminiscing about the past would soften her, that he might still have a chance. But he had never considered that these memories were like scars, and every time she recalled them, it was like ripping them open again. Victoria closed her eyes. Her voice was heavy, yet soft. "If you love me, then prove it to me. They say love is about letting go. Surely you're willing to set me free?" At her words, Sincere froze completely. He was like a wooden doll, unresponsive for a long time. Victoria pressed her lips together and continued in a calm voice. "I don't love you anymore. In my last life, I didn't want to leave because I still loved you. But now, I don't love you anymore. When I'm with you, all I can think about is escaping. It's the same feeling you had in our last life when you stopped loving me, that desperate need for a divorce." Her words were like daggers, stabbing into Sincere's heart. In the small space, Victoria heard his breath catch. Then he lowered his head, desperately trying to hide his devastation. A moment later, Sincere's voice was filled with bitterness. "Is there no chance at all?" Victoria replied slowly. "None." Her voice was calm and firm, almost cold. They were silent for a long time. He looked up at Victoria, his eyes full of conflict, as if he wanted to say something. Victoria watched him quietly. Their eyes met for a second. He lowered his gaze, and without warning, a single tear fell. It landed right in front of Victoria. "If this is what you want, I'm willing to let you go." Victoria looked at the teardrop on the floor, feeling a mix of irony and relief. The irony was that they had once believed they would never be apart, but love, in the end, could spoil. A lifetime was too long. The relief was that, thankfully, her awakening hadn't come too late. Back home, they sat across from each other in silence. Victoria once again took out the divorce papers and a pen, pushing them across the table toward him. At this point, Victoria didn't even want to speak anymore. Sincere's body stiffened. After a long moment, he slowly raised his hand and wrote his name, stroke by stroke. Sincere Shaw. On the final stroke, he pressed down so hard he nearly tore the paper. Everything happened in silence: the struggle, the reluctance, the guilt. The atmosphere in the living room was heavy. As she watched him finish signing, Victoria reached out to take the papers, but couldn't pull them away. Sincere's arm was pressing down on a corner. Afraid of tearing the paper, Victoria relaxed her grip and looked up at him silently. Why put on such a display of affection now? Their eyes met. Sincere understood her look. A flash of shame crossed his face, and he finally, slowly, moved his arm. Taking the papers, Victoria glanced at them, confirmed everything was in order, and a small smile touched her lips. Then, she stood up. As she turned, she saw his mother standing behind her, leaning against the doorframe. Victoria froze, unsure what to say, but Martha blinked her tear-filled eyes and sighed. "Go, the country needs you more." A lump formed in Victoria's throat. The person she would miss most was her mother-in-law. Finally, her voice hoarse, she called out one last time, "Goodbye, Mom." Then, she turned and left without looking back. Outside, Victoria's footsteps paused. She saw a familiar Jeep parked not far away. Victoria lowered her head and smiled faintly. When she looked up again, her expression was neutral. She walked over and knocked on the backseat window. The window rolled down, revealing Orion Grant's face. He watched her, his gaze steady. All settled? Victoria glanced at Orion, not bothering to call him out for deliberately waiting. She pretended not to know and asked, "Thank you so much for coming to pick me up, Engineer Grant." With that, Victoria moved to the front passenger seat, preparing to get in. Just as she opened the door, the back door opened, and Orion got out. His lips were pressed into a tight line, his gaze slightly uncomfortable. "Sit in the back. I have some work to debrief you on." Her hand, holding the door handle, paused. A hint of a smile appeared in Victoria's eyes. She suppressed her amusement and walked over, looking up at him with a very serious expression. "All right then. Awaiting your orders, sir." Orion knew her personality and could tell she was teasing him. His throat moved. His body acted faster than his mind. He instinctively made space for her. The gesture seemed casual, but only he knew his heart had skipped a beat. Victoria got in, moving to the far side. Orion followed close behind. They weren't sitting close, but in the cramped space, they could still smell each other's scent. A faint minty fragrance filled her nostrils. "It smells nice," Victoria thought to herself, leaning back against the seat. The soldier in the front seat was Corporal Lee again. He glanced at the tense atmosphere in the rearview mirror, smiled to himself, and then broke the silence. Engineer Grant, Comrade Vance were heading out. The journey was smooth. After a long drive and passing through several security checkpoints, the car entered the airbase. The moment she got out, Victoria felt something was wrong. The entire base was shrouded in a gloomy atmosphere. Victoria and Orion exchanged a look, both sensing trouble. They went to the control tower and saw the instructor staring intently at the screen, his hand gripping the radio handset so tightly it looked like it might shatter. Orion's brow furrowed. "What's going on?" The instructor turned, his eyes cold. His gaze softened when he saw Orion, but his voice was still filled with anger. "The Americans are being outrageous. They're taking advantage of our New Year holiday to repeatedly harass our waters. They're doing it just to provoke us." After he spoke, the other pilots chimed in. "Yeah, Engineer Grant, you don't know. From New Year's Eve until just now, this is the third wave." Hearing this, Victoria's brow tightened. Just then, a voice came over the radio. "Report American reconnaissance plane has been driven off." At this, the mood in the room finally improved, the tense atmosphere easing. But Victoria's brow remained furrowed. She stared at the monitor, an idea forming in her mind. Orion noticed, and his expression tensed, his lips tightening. That day, Victoria submitted her divorce papers. Then she collapsed onto her bed, lying there staring at the white ceiling, lost in thought. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Victoria blinked, got up, and opened the door. She was met with Orion Grant's usual stoic face. He looked up, handed her a bottle of soda, and said coolly, "I need to talk to you. Let's chat." Victoria glanced at the orange soda, slowly took it, closed the door, and followed Orion out into the hallway. It was late at night. The incandescent light cast two shadows on the floor. They leaned against the wall side by side. Victoria sipped through a straw, while Orion drank from the bottle like it was a beer, as if something was troubling him. After a long time, his cool voice echoed in the hallway. "You seemed distracted today. Something on your mind?" The hallway fell silent. After a moment, Victoria tried to joke, "You pay a lot of attention to me." It was a clear attempt to change the subject. "It's been 2 years," Orion replied. Victoria was taken aback. She looked at him and saw a distant look in his eyes. "We've known each other for 2 years. You think I don't know your moods by now?" Hearing this, Victoria's eyes flickered. She looked down to hide her emotions. "I want to test fly the Bluebird." The Bluebird was a famous medium-sized jet bomber that used technology acquired from the Soviets. After being imported and reverse-engineered, it was now called the Eagle, with improvements to its payload and speed. It could now perform bombing, reconnaissance, and patrol missions. If it could be mass-produced, their response to American fighters wouldn't be so passive. The problem was, the model was still unstable. Due to various issues, 3 test pilots had already died during the testing phase. After Victoria said this, the hallway was silent for a long time. They both knew that participating in the Eagle's test flights meant a drastically increased risk of death. The atmosphere grew heavy. After a long moment, Orion let out a breath and said in a suppressed tone, "Submit the request. I'll help you." It meant that if any superiors objected, Orion would step in, just as he had supported her to become the Starfare's test pilot against everyone's objections years ago. Victoria punched his shoulder lightly and smiled. "Thanks, Engineer Grant, you're a great leader." Orion felt the light blow and stared at her, a hint of worry in his eyes. "Your life is more important than anything. Don't be reckless. Eject if you have to." Of the two previous pilots, one had missed the window to eject while trying to save the data. The other had tried to save the plane to avoid abandoning his unconscious co-pilot, but had failed. Both were lost forever in the snowy mountains. Orion knew that if Victoria faced a similar situation, she would make the same choice, but he couldn't help but advise her anyway. He spoke, his eyes fixed on hers. His gaze was stubborn, as if he wouldn't look away until she agreed. Seeing this, Victoria's heart softened. She patted his shoulder and smiled. "I won't. I'm very careful with my life, don't worry." They talked for a little longer before parting ways to their respective dorms. Orion walked a few steps, and at the corner, he suddenly stopped. He turned to look back at Victoria, his gaze softening for a moment. She was still the same as ever, stubborn and strong. His memory flashed back to a year and a half ago. Victoria, as the top graduate of her class, had reported to Air Base 1. Orion, having already heard of her reputation and needing a test pilot for his new aircraft, had come to greet her personally. To test her limits, Orion had given her a training regimen that made others tremble in fear. They had all muttered amongst themselves, "My God, you're trying to work her to death. Even a man might not be able to handle that training. Can a woman do it?" These words had naturally reached Victoria's ears, but she said nothing, proving herself with her actions, especially in the anti-vertigo test, where her talent was undeniable. Orion was very satisfied. "You've passed the test," he had told her. "What aircraft do you want to fly?" It had been an overcast day. Victoria stood on the tarmac, looking at the Starfare fighter jet, her eyes filled with excitement and longing. Just then, a break appeared in the thick clouds, and a beam of light shone down on her. "I want to fly the Starfare," she had said. In that moment, she was beautiful. Victoria's transfer request for the test flight was greenlit all the way. Orion had clearly pulled some strings. The day of the test flight, the weather was perfect. Victoria was in her flight suit, completely bundled up. Orion came to see her off personally, his expression as serious as ever, though it couldn't hide his inner tension. "Victoria, are you sure you're ready?" Victoria glanced at his clenched fist and replied, "No problem, Engineer Grant." They faced each other and nodded solemnly. Then Victoria waved at him and boarded the back seat of the Bluebird bomber. The Bluebird had two cockpits, the front for piloting, the back for radar. Since this was Victoria's first time on the new aircraft, she would start in the back to familiarize herself with it. After boarding, her partner in the front seat turned around. His face was hidden by his helmet, but his excitement was clear in his voice. "Comrade Vance, I finally get to fly with you. Let me see what a genius looks like up close." It was her classmate from the Flight Academy, Leo Conway. As classmates, they were good friends. Victoria, helmet on, smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, you're about to find out." Leo burst out laughing. "You're something else, not humble at all." Victoria just smiled. She had become immune to being called a genius and no longer cared about humility. After their greeting, the test flight began. The Bluebird's massive wings lifted it slowly into the air. The takeoff was smooth. As it stabilized in the clear blue sky, the people in the control tower let out a collective sigh of relief. In an unnoticed corner, Orion also let out a quiet breath. His eyes were dark as he thought, "I hope every flight from now on is this smooth." The bomber flew steadily through the air. Victoria looked at the white clouds and squinted, remarking, "Every time I fly and see the clouds, I think how beautiful they are." Leo, in the front, replied, "Yeah, my son is so jealous that I can fly." The mention of a child softened Victoria's heart. Though she had never been a mother, the topic always brought a gentle smile to her face. They chatted for a while. By the time the plane reached the unpopulated test zone, they began the missile drop mission. Boom, a missile hit a mountaintop, causing a massive explosion. Victoria's eyes lit up. This new bomber is incredible. After several successful drops, they had expended all their missiles. Just then, Orion's voice came over the radio. Test flight mission complete. Requesting return to base. Roger that. They acknowledged the order and began their return journey. The sky was peaceful, but disaster struck in an instant. Warning, warning, fuselage malfunction, the alarm blared. Victoria's pupils contracted. This was the first time she had ever encountered this situation, but she quickly calmed herself. Sincere's voice came over the radio. Number 580, number 361, follow emergency procedures. Prepare to eject, Leo responded quickly. Roger, then he paused, and his calm voice reached Victoria. Victoria, we're over a populated area. I'm going to fly to an unpopulated zone first. You pull the data card and eject first. Victoria, in her helmet, frowned deeply. We eject together. Don't be stubborn, Leo said, his voice strained. Just as he finished speaking, the bomber stalled for a moment, then plunged downwards, a thick plume of smoke billowing from its tail. A feeling of weightlessness washed over them. Amidst the mechanical warnings, Orion's urgent voice crackled over the radio. Number 580, number 361, eject immediately. Meanwhile, in a residential area of the city, Sincere was staring blankly into his courtyard. This place held the last of his memories with Victoria. A moment later, he heard shouts from outside. A plane is crashing, it looks like a fighter jet. A crash? Could it be Victoria? Sincere shot to his feet. The sudden movement made his vision go black for a second, but he couldn't afford to collapse. He stumbled out, frantically calling the military. The news he received made his world crumble. The pilot was Victoria. Sincere held his breath and yelled for his driver. Quick, to the Air Force Base. When he arrived at the base gate, Sincere couldn't bring himself to get out of the car. He was terrified of hearing bad news. He sat there for a long time. Finally, Sincere's stiff body moved. He looked at the base entrance, took a deep breath, and opened the car door with a trembling hand. As he entered the base, the air seemed thick with grief. Sincere's heart sank lower and lower. He couldn't control his emotions. Comrade, he asked the soldier guiding him, how is Victoria? The soldier's eyes were red, his voice hoarse. She ejected successfully, but it was at a low altitude. It's possible. Hearing this, Sincere's breath caught in his throat. A cold wind blew past, chilling his heart to ice. At the same time, Orion and other soldiers were rushing to the rescue zone in a helicopter. Victoria had ejected over a mountainous area. She had ejected, but the altitude was too low. Her chances were slim, and Leo, he had gone down with the bomber. It was a certain death. The setting sun reflected in Orion's light-colored eyes, turning them watery. The search felt endless. The team searching for Leo sent back the terrible news. Number 580, Leo Conway, confirmed deceased. Hearing the voice on the radio, the soldiers in the helicopter froze. After a long moment, quiet sobs broke out, but they were quickly suppressed. Orion's eyes were bloodshot. He lowered his head, guilt and helplessness churning in his chest. This bomber should never have been built. He blamed himself endlessly. But he also knew that if this bomber could be successfully mass-produced, it would alleviate a great deal of pressure on the country. The nation comes before the family. Sacrifice was inevitable. As soldiers, they had to face the danger head-on. But these were lives. Just then, the observer in the helicopter said, "I see Victoria's parachute." The somber atmosphere instantly turned serious. The soldiers immediately prepared for the rescue. Orion closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were clear and calm. Prepare for rescue. The helicopter could only land in a clearing. The mountain was high, over 3,000 feet. The men split into several teams and entered the forest from different directions. Darkness fell. A fog rolled in through the mountains. Victoria was woken by pain. When she opened her eyes, she was suspended in midair. She held her breath and assessed the situation. Her parachute was caught on a massive tree branch. She was a good 30 feet off the ground. Jumping would mean certain injury, if not death. And the situation above was not much better. One of the parachute cords was frayed and could snap at any moment. The danger made Victoria forget her pain. In desperate situations, people often find hidden potential. Victoria scanned her surroundings and decided to attempt a self-rescue. About 10 feet to her right was another tree trunk. She could try to swing herself over to it. No sooner said than done. She began to swing her body back and forth. First attempt failure. Second, third, fourth. On the fifth try, just as her toes were about to touch the trunk, the frayed cord snapped under the strain. Her body plummeted. Phew! Victoria let out a slow breath. Good thing, I reacted fast. She looked up. Her arms were wrapped tightly around the tree trunk. Though her body was still dangling, at least she had a foothold. The next moment, using her arm strength, she pulled herself onto the trunk. Luckily, the trunk was wide. Victoria sat semi-upright on the branch, waiting for rescue. She chose not to climb down. The forest at night was dangerous, and there could be wild animals. Staying in the tree was the smart move. But the worst part was, she seemed to be bleeding. Victoria pressed down on the wound in her stomach, feeling her body grow colder as the blood seeped out. Despair crept into her heart. She looked up, her gaze hazy, at the slivers of moonlight filtering through the dense canopy. Don't sleep, she whispered to herself. In the dark, dense foliage, Victoria's eyes slowly closed. Late at night, the January air was still frigid. The cold bit at the marching soldiers. Orion followed the team, step by step, staring into the endless darkness, a sense of despair growing in his heart. Hours had passed, and they still hadn't found Victoria. Just then, a powerful beam of light cut through the darkness ahead. It moved quickly. Orion's gaze sharpened. He thought he saw something. Shine the light 25 degrees to the southwest, up high, he ordered. Roger. The light swept over the area again. This time, everyone saw it. Their faces lit up. It's the parachute, someone shouted. They rushed forward to investigate, and finally, they found the unconscious Victoria among the branches. At the Air Force Base, Sincere sat at the sentry post, as still as a statue, his eyes glued to the road ahead. The instructor sighed and approached him. Come inside and wait. We'll notify you as soon as we have news. Sincere didn't move. He prayed endlessly, hoping for Victoria's safe return. Suddenly, the instructor's radio crackled to life. Report, sir. We've found Victoria. She's being rushed to First People's Hospital for emergency treatment. Hearing this, the rigid Sincere finally moved. Without a word, he got up, got into his car, and sped to the hospital. When he reached the emergency room, Sincere paused. A group of soldiers waited in the hallway, their faces grim. Could it be? He closed his eyes, pushing away the terrible thought, and walked up to the only familiar face, Orion Grant. Victoria, he said slowly. How is she? Orion looked up at him, his lips pressed tight. We don't know yet, he said hoarsely. She's in surgery. Hearing this, Sincere stood to the side, his heart heavy, and waited. The wait was agonizingly long. Finally, the door to the operating room opened. Everyone rushed forward, but Sincere was faster. Doctor, how is Victoria? He asked urgently. The doctor removed his mask, his face weary. She's out of danger. You can go in and see her. Everyone was overjoyed. Thank you, doctor, they exclaimed. They were about to go in, but Orion stopped them. He looked at each of his exhausted comrades and said gratefully, You're all tired. Go get some rest. I'll stay here and watch over her. The soldiers realized they hadn't slept all night. Exhausted, they looked at each other. Not wanting to disturb Victoria, they dispersed to rest. Only then did Orion enter the room. As he looked up, he saw that Sincere was already sitting by the bed. His hands were clasped tightly around Victoria's. A flicker of annoyance crossed Orion's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He looked at Victoria's pale face, a deep sense of regret in his eyes. The doctor had said that Victoria's injuries were severe. Her life was saved, but she might never be able to fly a fighter jet again. At that thought, Orion's heart sank. He knew how much Victoria longed for the freedom of the sky. If she couldn't fly, the pain would be unbearable. Victoria never thought she would survive. When she opened her eyes again, the first thing she saw was Sincere's joyful face. I'm not dead. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. Sincere squeezed her hand and nodded fiercely. You're not dead. You're not dead. Thank God. He was so emotional, he was almost incoherent. Victoria tried to pull her hand away, but had no strength. She could only purse her lips in frustration, her eyes searching for Orion. She knew he would be there, and she wanted to ask about Leo, but she couldn't see him. Where's Orion? She asked. As she spoke, Sincere's grip tightened. Victoria felt the pressure and looked at him, even more confused. Sincere's eyes dimmed for a moment. He went to get you some porridge, he said reluctantly. Speak of the devil. The next moment, footsteps approached the door. Victoria looked toward the sound and saw Orion walk in, holding an aluminum container. She forgot everything else. In her haste, she tried to sit up. Sincere, though jealous that she was so eager to see him, still supported her gently. "Be careful." Victoria didn't care what he thought. She looked at Orion and asked tentatively, "How's Leo?" Orion had reached the bedside. At her question, a look of sorrow crossed his face. His eyes reddened. He sacrificed himself. Boom, Victoria felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Even though she had prepared herself, her heart still felt like it was being torn apart. Her eyes welled up uncontrollably. "Leo, you liar," she choked out. A single tear fell, shattering her memory back to that moment in the sky. The bomber was in a steep dive, but at the last moment, Leo had pulled up the nose, clumsily flying out of the populated area. They were temporarily out of danger. Leo had agreed they would eject together, but he never did. Victoria looked up, her eyes red, her voice broken. What happened after? Orion had been in the control tower. He knew what happened next. His throat moved. Suppressing his emotions, he said hoarsely, his ejection system malfunctioned. He couldn't eject. From the very beginning, Leo never had a chance. But he had still acted nonchalantly, talking to Victoria as if nothing was wrong, just so he wouldn't affect her, so she could eject and survive. Victoria finally broke down, her sobs echoing in the room, seeping through the crack in the door and into the hallway, stopping the senior officers who were about to enter. One of them sighed, "Let's go back for now, let her rest." 7 days later, at the military memorial service, Victoria, forcing herself up despite her injuries, was wheeled to the site. She looked and saw a white cloth draped over a body. She knew it wasn't a real body, just a wooden mannequin. Because for fallen airmen, a complete body was rarely found. A mannequin was used as a substitute. This wasn't her first memorial service, and it wouldn't be her last. But how she wished none of this had ever happened, and that it would never happen again. Just then, a child came running over, crying. He was too small to climb up. He could only stand on his tiptoes to look at the white cloth, his voice a heart-wrenching cry. "Daddy!" Behind the child was his mother, Leo's wife. Her eyes red, she held her sobbing child and whispered comforting words. It's okay. Daddy is watching us from heaven." The scene made everyone present's eyes well up. Victoria, in her wheelchair, couldn't bear to watch. She turned her head, and tears streamed down her face. The solemn memorial service ended in a heavy atmosphere. Victoria watched for a long time. Then, she turned and looked at Orion, who was standing behind her wheelchair. "I want to listen to Leo's last recording." Orion paused, his lips moving as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he said nothing and pushed her to the control tower. The recording started. Leo's voice filled the room. "My ejection system is malfunctioning. I'm not making it back. Brothers, send someone to rescue Victoria. That altitude is too dangerous." Victoria's eyes reddened again. Even at the end, Leo was thinking of her. He continued, "Tell my wife and kids, I'm not a coward. I'm the bravest man in the world." By the end, Victoria's face was streaked with tears. After a long time, Orion, who had been standing behind her, stepped forward and silently handed her a packet of tissues. Her blurry vision moved upwards. Victoria was too grief-stricken. She threw her arms around Orion's waist and buried her head in his chest, sobbing. Orion stiffened, then relaxed, his warm hand gently stroking her head. "Don't worry," he said, his voice firm. "I will make sure the failure rate of the Bluebird is brought down to a minimum." His voice was full of conviction. Victoria didn't look up. Her muffled voice came from his shirt. "I believe you." In her past life, Orion had indeed succeeded. Before her rebirth, she had even looked up his profile online. Orion Grant, lead developer of the Golden Crow, supersonic fighter jet, achieved a breakthrough in jet fighter technology, later participated in the development of the Bluebird bomber. Among others, significantly closing the gap between our country's fighter jet technology and that of the US and the Soviets. He had dedicated his entire life to scientific research. Until her rebirth, he had remained unmarried. Victoria looked forward to seeing that day. She believed Leo would have wanted to see it too. They talked all night, dreaming of a future where their country's fighter jets would be among the best in the world. The next day, the dead were gone, but the living had to go on. They masked their grief and faced a new day. Orion had to return to his post, while Victoria had to go back to the hospital to recover. He came to see her off. After deftly lifting her into the car, he hesitated before closing the door. "What's wrong?" Victoria asked, turning back to him. Orion looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. Finally, he said with difficulty, "I can't stay with you while you recover." After yesterday, their relationship had grown closer. Victoria wasn't stupid. She knew Orion had feelings for her. He was blaming himself for not being able to be with her, but she didn't see it that way. She smiled and said seriously, "The country needs you more. Work hard." Their eyes met. Orion's flickered, and the words, "You can't fly anymore," died on his lips. In the end, it was Victoria who closed the car door. She thought about the look in Orion's eyes, and a feeling of suffocation tightened in her chest. Back at the hospital, Victoria lay on the bed, staring out the window. New buds were sprouting on the branches outside, a sign of new life. A sparrow chirped on a branch, but the scene couldn't lift her heavy heart. A little while later, the door to her room opened. Victoria didn't turn. A familiar set of footsteps approached, followed by Sincere's voice. "How are you feeling today?" When she didn't respond, he walked around to the other side of the bed, his expression complex. Victoria had seen that look for 7 days straight. Almost everyone looked at her with that same expression. She had already noticed. There was only one reason that would make everyone look at her with such pity. She pressed her lips together and asked softly, "I can't fly anymore, can I?" The atmosphere froze. Sincere's eyes darted away, and Victoria's heart sank into darkness. After a moment, he said in a comforting tone, "You can still fly commercial airliners." "It's the same." "It's not the same," Victoria thought. "It's not the same at all." A wave of helplessness washed over her. She didn't want to talk anymore. Victoria closed her eyes, unwilling to look at Sincere's pitying gaze any longer. "I want to rest." After saying that, she ignored him. Sincere stood there for a long time, looking at her pale face, his heart aching. But at the same time, a dark, selfish thought crept into his mind. If Victoria couldn't fly fighter jets anymore, she wouldn't be in contact with Orion Grant. He still had a chance. In the following days, Sincere devoted himself to caring for Victoria, delegating all his factory work to his subordinates. As usual, he returned to the old house. Seeing Martha in the kitchen, he said, "Mom, make some chicken soup today, it's good for Vicky." Martha shot him a look. "You don't have to tell me. I started it early this morning. I'll take it over when it's ready." Sincere tried to stop her, but Martha glared at him. "Don't you dare stop me. This old lady is going today." For days, Sincere hadn't been coming home at night. Martha had sensed something was wrong. She had finally cornered him yesterday, and after some questioning, found out that Victoria was in the hospital. Her heart ached for her. With that, Martha went into the kitchen, ladled the chicken soup into an aluminum lunchbox, wrapped it in a cloth to keep it warm, placed it in a wooden basket, and set off with Sincere. The old house wasn't far from the hospital, so they walked. They didn't notice Melody standing in the shade of a tree not far away. Ever since Sincere had made his comeback, he had completely ignored her. She was filled with resentment. The thought of the immense fortune that had slipped through her fingers was a constant source of pain. Since then, she had been lurking around Sincere's house, hoping for a chance encounter to win him back. But Sincere was completely unmoved, which only frustrated her more. Watching them walk away, Melody's eyes darted around, and she began to follow them. Inside the hospital, "Vicky, come on, have some chicken soup." Martha's voice preceded her. The dazed Victoria finally reacted, looking toward the door. The next moment, a worried-looking Martha appeared. She walked closer, her eyes filled with pain as she looked at Victoria's face. "You've gotten so thin. Mom made you some chicken soup to build you up." Victoria glanced at Sincere, then at Martha, and gave a faint smile. "Sincere and I are divorced." The implication was that she should change how she addressed her. Sincere tensed but said nothing. Martha understood perfectly. She shot a look at her son, then turned to Victoria, her expression instantly changing to one of kindness. "It's all right that you're divorced. You can be my goddaughter, it's the same thing." The statement was completely unexpected. Sincere cleared his throat. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Martha gave him no face, tilting her chin and huffing. Turning back to Victoria, her attitude shifted again. She took the lunchbox out of the basket, unwrapped it, opened it, and said with a smile, "I've been simmering this for hours. Drink it while it's hot. Victoria watched, her heart warmed. Her mood improved slightly. She took the soup and sipped the delicious broth. After chatting for a long time, Martha finally left reluctantly. Sincere went to see her off, leaving Victoria alone in the room. She had just started to rest when the closed door opened again. Thinking it was Sincere, Victoria didn't look up. "Back so soon?" she said flatly. A cold, female voice scoffed. Victoria looked up and saw Melody standing in the doorway, staring at her coldly. "No wonder Sincere has been ignoring me. It's because you've bewitched him." The end.